John Gonzalez of The Ringer is on the line. Evening, John.
Gentlemen.
We want to talk about the NBA playoffs. The first round is ongoing. Really, the story of this week has been the story of comebacks. The Celtics last night, fourth quarter comeback to beat the Pacers, following on from a record-breaking comeback from the Clippers to beat the Warriors earlier in the week. 31-point deficit overturned. What stood out for you over the past few nights?
Yeah, I think with the Celtics, it's been difficult to figure out who they are, what sort of identity they really have after 82 regular season games. I was still pretty unsure. I think to see them acquit themselves against the Pacers, that's probably a relief for them. As for the Clippers, they're not going to win this series, but it's a nice story for them. It's good. It's good that they were back in the playoffs. It's nice that they beat the Warriors, but I think that's just sort of like one shining moment for them before this is over.
From the Celtics' point of view, then, they are 2-0 up now against Indiana, and Kyrie Irving, it feels as though, or certainly looks as though, he's maybe finally at home in Boston.
Yeah, that's, I think, long-term still debatable, but short-term, I mean, he's had an excellent season on the court. I think off the court, everything that's happened with him in the locker room and criticizing the young guys and trying to give them sort of tough love advice that was roundly rejected by most of the roster has been problematic. And then there's still the question about what will happen with him in the offseason and whether or not he'll stay there as a free agent or if he would jump to New York potentially with KD. But certainly on the floor, they need him, and he's played really well. So in that regard, all is well.
It was sort of seen that when he left the Cavs that he wanted to go and he wanted to be this leadership figure. He wanted his own team. Is he that type of personality from the way you're talking there and the way he's trying to control these younger players? Maybe he wants to be a leader, but maybe he's just not cut out to be.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, I remember being in Cleveland for the conference finals a couple of years ago when one of the reporters asked Kyrie Irving, hey, do you ever think about having your own team? And that's the kind of thing when you ask a player that generally they'll sort of dodge and deflect and not really answer it. But he flat out said, yes, I think about it all the time, about wanting to have my own team. And then now he has that. And as he said about LeBron and to LeBron, when all this drama was getting kicked up, it's harder to do than it looks. I mean, he's had some mistakes this year, and I think he's learning from those.
John, you mentioned LeBron there, and it seems ridiculous to almost go through an NBA conversation without bringing up his name, but he's noticeable by his absence in this year's playoffs. First time since 2005 he hasn't gotten this far. It's fair to say the LA Lakers project hasn't quite worked out as many had anticipated.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I was of the mindset that, LeBron going to Los Angeles would reboot the franchise. They would return to their glory days. He would make the playoffs because LeBron always makes the playoffs. And as you noted, this is the first time since 2005 that he hasn't. And it really couldn't have been more of a disaster of a season for the Lakers. From the very beginning where they had injuries and they got in that fight with Rajon Rondo and Chris Paul, to LeBron not playing in certain stretches, the longest absence of his career during the season, to then Magic Johnson just quitting out of nowhere on television without telling the owner. It really has been a disaster for them.
And is it also fair to say that maybe rather than getting these totemic figures like Magic Johnson and even LeBron himself, maybe they need to peel things back a little bit and just get the best people for the job, more so behind the scenes than on the court?
Yeah, well, I mean, therein lies the rub. How do you convince those people to go to that organization, considering that they've had so many missteps and mistakes over the last few seasons? I mean, they haven't been good in quite a while, certainly since before Kobe retired. And now you have LeBron, that's fine, but he's definitely not in his prime anymore. He's still LeBron, but he's on his way down. So how do you convince these good, talented players to go to an organization that now needs a new front office structure, needs a new head coach? LeBron is in decline. I mean, they have a lot to answer right now, and those questions won't be easy.
We spent a lot of this week talking about Tiger Woods' success at the Masters and what it means for golf and interest levels in golf and viewing figures for the majors upcoming. Is LeBron that big a star that people don't take quite as much of an interest in the playoffs because he's not there and because of some of the memorable finals between the Cavs and the Warriors over the last few years? The fact that he's not involved, does that affect interest levels, or is the game just too big for that?
I think people who like basketball watch basketball anyway, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't some sort of dip. I mean, there's a casual fan who loves LeBron, who wants to follow him, who wants to see the greatest player of his generation, and maybe the greatest player ever in the playoffs. And I think it's certainly weird to watch the playoffs without him. I'm not used to it. It hasn't happened in quite a long time. it should be interesting later on in the playoffs when the Warriors face whoever they end up facing in the finals without LeBron to see what kind of ratings that series draws, because it'll be something new and nobody knows what to expect.
Kyrie Irving was very strong after the win on Wednesday night about complacency and making sure that no complacency crept in with the younger players at the Celtics. When you look at what happened to the Warriors and blowing that 31 point lead, you say they're going to get through this. Is there any suggestion that maybe there is a bit of complacency kicking in?
I think they get bored. I thought they got bored during the season. They flat out said it before. They said it last season. Last season, I went and did a whole story on them where they all said, yeah, we've already gone through this. We get bored. At this point, I'm sure playing the Clippers in the first round doesn't seem like much of a challenge to them. And that's probably how you end up with a result like the Clippers beating them. But as this thing goes on and as it gets closer to another title, I fully expect that they'll just, be on cruise control and they'll, if not sweep whoever they play in the finals, then win the series pretty handily.
And just in terms of potential opponents in the East, I know Philadelphia is where your heart is, John. And since 2001 and the Allen Iverson era, really, they've been kind of searching out for this next generation, as it were, and the process obviously gets thrown around a lot. But does it finally feel like Philadelphia has a strategy and a direction, and even if they don't get over the final hurdle this year, that they're on the right track?
That's debatable, I think. I think on the one hand, you'd look at it and say if you have Joel Embiid and you have Ben Simmons, then probably, they are on the right track. On the other hand, as I just wrote about for The Ringer, without Joel Embiid fully healthy, all of their other plans about what do they do with Jimmy Butler in the offseason and acquiring Tobias Harris, and do they pay him the max contract, and how do they fill out the rest of the roster, and how long will this team be a viable contender in the Eastern Conference, all that goes out the window. And right now he's not fully healthy, and they're sort of in a day-to-day situation with him. So, with the Sixers, I could see them going to the conference finals, and I could also see the Nets beating them in this first round. Everything is up in the air for them right now.
We have a text in from Paul, who watched a tribute to Larry Bird on YouTube last night. Some of those no-look passes and tip passes were slick. As a basketball newbie, what player should I be watching out for in the playoffs who can make those off-the-cuff plays? Give me two names.
Oh, you want
no
two
pressure.
Names? Off the top of my head. Well, we talked about Kyrie Irving. He's a great passer. He's a great scorer. He can really get into the lane if you like to see somebody who can drive. And then my personal favorite, and this is probably a little bit nuanced, but I like Ricky Rubio. He's a fantastic passer. He's been doing it since he was a kid. If you want to see, good angles and passes that not everybody can make, he's one of those guys, but he might not be around that long given how the Jazz have played against the Rockets.
What about James Harden? Is he the best player in the league right now?
Him or Giannis? Are we talking about the best player or the MVP?
The MVP.
Yeah, I think it's probably a toss-up. I'd probably vote for James Harden. Giannis has had an absolutely incredible season. The Bucks have had an incredible season. They've had the best record in the playoffs or in the regular season all year. However, I'm probably still leaning James Harden because he's just so unstoppable offensively, and I think if you took him off of the Rockets, they'd absolutely crater.
You mentioned how good he is offensively, John, but it's always been thrown at him that maybe his defensive lapses have let the Rockets down at times. Has he managed to address that this season, or is his offense just so good that it overrides any defensive flaws?
He's been better defensively, but that's a low bar. I think like the last couple of years, he's tried harder, which I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, right? Like he's an NBA player and they should all be trying hard, but it's difficult. It's very difficult to be good at both ends of the floor, especially when he exhausts so much energy at the offensive end and when that's his primary focus of the game. I think that at some point you've got to try to steal a couple of breaths, a couple of plays here and there where you're not going full out, and he does that at the defensive end. But yeah, he's been slightly better.
Last time I heard Mr. G on the show, you were talking best basketball movies. No mention of Teen Wolf. For shame, John. For shame, says Michael.
Yeah, that's my fault. I'll take the hit on that one. White Men Can't Jump really is first and foremost in my heart.
Absolutely.
It's a fantastic movie. I also forgot He Got Game. He Got Game was a good one as well.
Teen Wolf I used to find a little bit frightening. I thought it could happen to me.
Yeah, well, Space Jam was the first one I got really ingratiated with, and then the Like Mike. Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's just this guy gets Michael Jordan's old trainers, puts them on.
Oh, I think I did see that when I was younger. Yeah. So he puts on Michael Jordan's trainers and he becomes Michael Jordan.
Well, he gets the talent.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's a good idea for a movie. That's sort of like that Beatles one that's coming out where the guy writes all the songs and he's sitting at home, he's playing this song to his girlfriend. She's like, that's unbelievable. He's like, yes, the Beatles. She's like, who are the Beatles? He's like, what? And he has all the Beatles songs and they're suddenly all his. Nobody's ever heard them before. It's genius. Anyways, I think it's out soon. Go see it, John.
I'm off to the theater right now.
All right, great stuff, John. Good
Cheers,
to talk to you.
John.
We'll talk to you later
Thanks
as
for
the
having me,
playoffs
guys.
roll on. No doubt John Gonzalez there.